We do welcome questions from you. If you use the chat function and type in your question into that, either to everyone or directly to me, Juliet Scott-Croxford, and I will see that, and we can either unmute you so you can ask your question directly to the speakers, or if you prefer to stay anonymous, that's totally fine, and I'll weave it into the conversation as we go. So let's kick off how the future of agriculture and food would change in a post-pandemic world. So firstly, a personal check-in with all of our speakers today. How are you doing personally? And I'd love to hear just a bit from you all briefly about your background and how you became involved in the agriculture food space. Amy, let's start with you.
So Juliet, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here today and talk about this topic of food and agriculture and the future of it. So I am in the Hudson Valley, New York, which is about 90 miles north of Manhattan in New York City. Actually, there's quite a few farms here as well, including dairy and small farms and farmers markets. So I became really passionate about and interested in agriculture. Actually, now it's been 4 years, when I was living out in California, and I was assigned to Salinas Valley, California, which is known as the salad bowl of the world. 80% of the leafy greens, as I learned, is actually produced there. So before that, I was just a voracious consumer. I mean, I love walking through supermarket aisles. I love eating salad, love going to restaurants, but I never knew how the food was produced and seeded and planted until I was there. So I fell into that, and I can talk more about a bit about that later as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. And Dariush, welcome. Hi to you. How are you doing? How's the past few months been for you? And please share a bit about your background.
Yeah, so first, my background, I'm a cardiologist. I have a doctorate in public health, and people ask how come a cardiologist has become so interested in nutrition and the dean of a graduate school of nutrition. And my answer is, why isn't every cardiologist passionate about nutrition? Now, this is the leading health challenge of our time. It's the leading sustainability challenge of our time. It's one of the leading issues for equity and disparities. And so, if you put that together with the economic consequences of poor health, food is really the big opportunity for our time. And I think COVID, as we'll discuss, has shown that very, very clearly, showing how fractured our food system is, and how diet-related diseases like obesity and hypertension and heart disease and obesity are dramatically increasing risks from COVID. And so, for me, this is the space to be in to make a difference in people's lives. In terms of how we're doing personally, we live outside Boston. Tufts is in Boston, and where we are. And we're doing great. I mean, we have the science, the knowledge, the means, the resources to know how to buy, cook, prepare healthy foods, keep ourselves fit. And what drives me crazy is that we are the exception, and the vast majority of Americans don't have the knowledge, the ability, the resources, the time to be able to eat healthy every day. And so we're doing great, and I wish everyone could do as well.
Me too, and thank you, Dariush. And Mariana, you're down in Brazil. Your parents were farmers, I think, and it's also your birthday today. So many happy returns today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, actually. I'm back in the farm after many, many years. Since I was a teenager that I didn't spend so much time in the farm. So it has been good to reconnect, right? Well, I'm daughter of farmers, correctly, and that's where my passion to agriculture comes from. But I didn't choose that path immediately. I graduated in business. I went to work in private institutions with business in general. And I started diving into technology, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. And then we saw an opportunity to connect that back to the roots and bring the technology to agriculture to support my family, my region, to produce better, adapt to climate change, and connect both worlds. And I think that's some point that we are seeing a lot is the new generation of successors getting back in contact with farms through technology.
Mariana, can you explain a bit about your business that you founded and what it does?
Yeah, sure. So Agrosmart is a digital agriculture platform that works across the food supply chain, We collect data from the fields with sensors, satellite imagery, and then we help farmers with daily decision makings with algorithms regarding irrigation, weather forecasts, alerts regarding disease, pests, spraying, and so on. And we generate also insights across the supply chain for input companies in their R&D and placement of products, from food and beverage industries that are sourcing from those farmers and need better traceability, sustainability KPIs, up to banks and insurance companies that need that data to mitigate their risk and create new products.
Thank you, Mariana. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the event. Welcome, everyone. Kathy, hi, how are you?
Well, how are you, Juliet?
I'm good, thank you. Just introduce yourself and share what you've been up to the last few months.
Sure, thank you. So I'm Kathy Entwistle. I'm a managing director at private wealth at Morgan Stanley. And Dariush, I am on the executive leadership board in New York City for Women Go Red, so American Heart Association, and very interested in the food heart health connection. So that was great to hear what you had to say. Amy, I have a daughter who works for Blue Apron. She's a chef, and one of her passions is obviously food, and potentially one day looking to buy a farm and create something there. So it's exciting to know that you're here as well. And Mariana, as Juliet has heard me say almost every week for the last 10 sessions, digital transformation and technology is where we want to be, and seeing what can be accomplished through technology is it's going to make so much positive change. So I'm excited to hear about what you're up to as well. Other than that, just working hard to make sure that we bring best information to to support Worth and Juliet and all of the listeners and participants, and as well for our clients at Morgan Stanley.
Thank you, Kathy. And so let's jump straight in and welcome everyone. For those of you that have just joined, we're talking about the future of agriculture and food, and we have a great group of speakers today. Dr. Dariush, let's just start with the context of what this pandemic has revealed and the impact it's had on nutrition. But interestingly, I think you talked about some of the disparities that were already there that it's revealed. Can you just share a bit about sort of your findings over the past few months as the pandemic has unfolded?
Yeah, well, even prior to COVID-19, we knew from very strong research that poor eating is the single leading cause of poor health on the planet in the United States and in almost every other country, mostly from chronic diseases, but also from undernutrition. And, shockingly, while poor eating is the leading cause of poor health, food is almost ignored in the healthcare systems around the world. And so we wonder why our healthcare system, is drowning in costs and suffocating the federal budget, suffocating growth of businesses, suffocating wage rises. And so that was already a challenge. And then, of course, that doesn't affect everyone equally. It dramatically affects, marginalized and low-income groups who have both worse diets and higher rates of diet-related chronic diseases. And that's, causing, again, enormous economic consequences. In the United States, about 20% of every dollar, in our economy is spent on healthcare. Just shocking. And, for the federal government, 50 years ago, the federal government was spending about 5% of its budget on healthcare. Now it's 32%. That growth has obliterated almost every other priority. And now with COVID, what we're seeing is this slow pandemic. We've had a true pandemic of obesity and diabetes and other diet-related diseases over 50 years. We now see the fast pandemic of COVID superimposed on this slow pandemic. And they're very, very highly related. COVID is extremely unusual in its predilection for people with poor metabolic health, people with obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and other things. The CDC just published a report about a week ago saying that if you're a 35-year-old American and you have diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, obesity, or a few other conditions, you have the risk of hospitalization of a 75-year-old with none of these conditions, and the risk of death of a 65-year-old with none of these conditions. And so, we're talking 30 to 40 years of biologic aging with poor metabolic health with COVID-19. And so if you think about what that means, if we had or could achieve a modestly healthier population, we could reopen our economies, and COVID would be more like a really bad flu than the devastating disease that it is. So this concept of a fast pandemic on top of a slow pandemic, I think really explains COVID. And COVID's not going away anytime soon, and it's also not going to be the last pandemic. So I think for us at Tufts, it's really important to get the science to policymakers and to businesses and to those in positions of leadership, because while we're talking every day about important things like social distancing and hand washing and wearing masks, every day we should be talking about foundational things to make our population healthier and reduce risks from COVID, like eating a little bit healthier, moving a little bit more, sleeping, and stress reduction. And we should be instituting policies that reward businesses that are innovating in this space, that reward businesses that are increasing health equity in this space. And it's a win-win. We reduce healthcare costs, we increase equity, and we make the population healthier. And so I think food is medicine, trying to integrate food into the healthcare system, and rewarding innovation are two really important priorities for this year and the next administration.
And talking about food as medicine, and Amy, you've been a sort of active entrepreneur in the ag tech space for some time. Can you share a bit about from farms to incubators and the focus there, but also how has day-to-day operations been affected for you through this time?
Well, From Farms to Incubators is a content base. We use video, documentary, photography, and the written word to tell the stories specifically of women innovators and founders in the ag tech space. So one of them actually is Mariana. So it started 4 years ago when I looked around in Salinas Valley myself, and I was covering agriculture as a journalist, which I've been a journalist for about 24 years and counting. I'm giving away my vintage, but anyway. So I looked around, I didn't see visibly a lot of women, and especially women of color at ag tech conferences, innovation conferences. And at the same time, Salinas Valley was trying to really boost its economy with the ag tech sector, because farming is such a huge industry there. It's a $9 billion industry. So I started to ask around how many minority women entrepreneurs are there in ag tech. In 2016, there were only a handful. And then 4 years later, there are dozens upon dozens that I've connected with to tell their stories. And there's a couple of reasons why. Number one is that farming and growers are facing tremendous challenges, and they've been facing these challenges for a number of years. Like in California, there's a severe labor shortage of farm workers and field workers. There's also a water and land supply issue, and there's also a lack of farmable land. And also there's this pressure to grow and produce enough food for like 9 billion people by 2050. So innovation and technology, which is all across the board, everything from AI, artificial intelligence, to blockchain, to semi-autonomous driving tractors, are a part of the solutions. And then I thought, hey, this is really cool. There's a lot more women founders in this space. A lot of them have amazing personal stories and journeys on what interested them in agriculture and ag tech. One of them moved from New York to California just to start this ag tech company in agriculture. So, now I'm completing all of those stories in the form of a book. So there's at least 24 plus stories about women innovators in that space. And it's pretty exciting. Yeah.
What surprised you most about the women that you've covered and the female founders in this space?
Wow, it really runs across the board, but there's several commonalities that I see in them. One is that they have a passion for changing the world. and then also a passion to solve problems that with a really like a big impact problems, such as everything from food safety to food security, and climate change and everything underneath that. But they have a real passion to not only launch, use their innovation, creativity to launch their own businesses, but to solve a problem and to make a difference in the food systems. Also that they are very tenacious and focused in their innovations. So their innovations, I've gone out there, it works, and the growers are really connected with these innovations and technologies now. So during COVID, I actually connected with quite a few female innovators just to check in on them and see what's happening with everything from their business side to investment side. And actually, I guess what surprised me was that their businesses are actually growing even faster due to COVID and the needs of the agriculture industry for automation and robotics. So that's something that really stood out. Another is that the investment in ag tech has increased and actually risen during this time as well, with some big investment companies and venture capitalists getting into ag tech. So those are a couple of the things that I've seen, yeah.
And Mariana, your clients are farmers, and so you must have seen a huge impact on them during this time. How have they been affected by COVID?
There's different scenarios depending on the crops, right? For example, in Latin America, the grains farmers, they got better because of the exchange rates between the dollars and the local currencies. So, and they encounter the time and the money to invest in tech. Usually they have larger operations and like are more and more investing because they cannot survive without gaining productivity and gaining sustainability. So we see like a lot of increase on demand from the grain farmers. The sugarcane farmers, they were affected to the bad side. There was also the oil price affecting there and decreasing prices and so on. So we saw like a separation between technologies that would actually bring return investment than the ones that would just be nice to have. So like usually sugar canes are larger groups and they do a lot of pilots and test a lot of technologies. So we saw like some cancellations there with some agtechs and really remaining just the ones that could save them right now, like not the future, not the long-term innovations. And we were very badly affected in the vegetables like hortifruti in general and flowers, big part because the cold chain is not so well developed as it is in the US. So farmers have a lot of time to have food delivered. So they would lose a lot of food in the farm while we have many people hungry, right, and demanding food in these times, losing their jobs. So it's hard to compare, but because we don't have so much good logistics and cold chains, there's a lot of things being lost on the farms. And the flowers like just didn't become a priority anymore with people losing their jobs. So there's also like a big problem there. In the beginning, it was more chaotic with the roadblocks and lockdowns and these kind of things. Right now, things are a bit better. Like people already understood how to behave. In the beginning, they retained investments and waited to see what's going. Now things are going back to normal as work is structured. Coffee had also issues with harvest, as many immigrants couldn't come to harvest coffee. So there was also issues there, but now little by little things go accommodating with like safety practices and face masks and social distancing, but going back to the procedures as normally. So there was a huge campaign and an engagement of the community that is like everyone needs to stay home so our farmers can go out, so we can continue to work and provide food. So like there was a huge campaign that agriculture never stops. And I think like the dean mentioned, people became aware where food comes from, right? Like during the pandemic, there was this rise in awareness of like, we have to help the farmers, we have to know what's going on, because we have to be sure that we will have food safety. And luckily, Brazil is one of the largest producers and exporters in the world. So we have enough food to maintain ourselves safe and to continue to export. And we have like a lot of commitment from the farming community that like, we won't let food be an issue. We already have too many health issues, so food has to be on the right side and the safe side.
And Amy mentioned about this sort of acceleration in ag tech, and specifically during this time. Have you, I mean, your clients are global clients. Have you seen an uptick in people reaching out to you, farmers reaching out to you around the technology that you have?
Yes, way more, for two reasons, I think. One, because they have to solve the issues in a way of remote monitoring, with not having to go to the field all the time, with less labor, right, because of the immigrations and automations and so on. But also we have like two kinds of customers: the corporate customers and the farmers. So the farmers, they were demanding because they actually needed it. When we saw like before, the ag techs were the future of agriculture. And now everyone in the supply chain, including the multinationals, input companies, they started working digital. So they had like, no, you cannot talk to a sales guy. You have to buy by phone. You have to buy online. You cannot. So the whole market changed. Then we became the normal, right? We were the next normal. Like now we are the normal. Everyone had to adapt to our way of selling, to our way of proceeding. So it got easier for farmers to trust and make consigned sales and so on. And on the corporate side, we noticed like they have time now. So there's a lot of projects that took very long to advance and so on. And now everyone's at home. No one wants to stop working because there's not always things to do. So the things start going faster. So for us, like we grew, like Amy said, and many other ag techs, we grew in the past months more than ever.
And Kathy, does it resonate with you? Amy also mentioned that there seems to be a lot more investment in the sort of agriculture and tech space. Is that a sector or an industry that you're seeing more interest in through your clients and through your work?
Yeah, actually, I'm seeing more of interest in the like direct to consumer aspect of it, where technology comes into play. And I would say whether it's food and food delivery and getting farm to table, or if it's even beverages or even alcohol. For years they've been looking to get that direct to consumer going, and it wasn't until COVID that picked up quite a bit. And I would imagine from the food space we're starting to see that as well. So yeah, and also great investments for private equity and venture capital and things like that, because a lot of these businesses aren't public yet, and the public companies that are investing in these businesses would be the areas that would be interesting for our clients as well. So it's two different ways to invest in it.
And I just want to encourage anyone that's listening to submit any questions in using your chat function, or you can send them directly to me, Juliet Scott-Croxford, if you have any questions for the speakers. Dariush, we're talking about nutrition and what sort of COVID has brought to light, and we like to sort of focus a lot in these conversations on solutions. What can be done to improve the challenges that we have both in the US and globally around lack thereof nutrition, lack of education on diet? Can you share your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, I think first it's really important to know the history of where we've been, because that explains where we are today. People see the food system and think it was a nefarious plot, and that everybody from agriculture to restaurants to retail to manufacturers were trying to get us sick. If you just look back not that far, from the 1920s to really the 1980s, the major goal of the global food system was to get enough calories to prevent starvation. We had a booming global population, and we weren't making enough food in the 1950s. And so the Green Revolution, the agricultural revolution, led to a huge production of commodity crops that were cheap, stable, inexpensive, things like rice and corn and wheat. That was very purposeful to prevent mass starvation, and it worked. The other big priority of the last century was vitamin deficiency diseases. That was all of the nutrition science of the early half of the 20th century was around vitamin deficiency diseases like scurvy and pellagra and rickets and night blindness. And so we consciously tried to create a food system where you have inexpensive, shelf-stable, starchy foods that are fortified with vitamins. And if you walk down the supermarket aisle today, that's what you see. And this legacy food system that was very successful at reducing hunger, preventing starvation globally, and reducing nutrient deficiency diseases was not built to address chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, cancers, cardiovascular diseases. That's really been a modern problem of the last 40 years. And so what we need to do now is shift from that legacy food system, which had successes, and shift to a new food system that also really emphasizes nutrition for chronic disease. And of course, there are vested interests. There are people who have made money in that system and are going to be resistant to change. But most companies, from ag to retail to restaurants to food manufacturers, see the writing on the wall, and they know that business as usual is no longer possible. So I think there are two really big solutions. There's a lot, but there are two really big ones. One, we need to invest in science. The level of science that we have now is much more than 30 or 40 years ago, but we're just scratching the surface. And so understanding things like the microbiome, all the trace phenolics and phytonutrients and things like cocoa and beans and coffee and blueberries, understanding the effects of food on the brain, on the immune system, on allergies, understanding the influences of the food environment and how the food environment influences our choices. There's a huge need for research. And in the United States in particular, I think it's time to really have kind of a federal moonshot to double down and really invest in nutrition research. And we've put together a coalition of more than 50 organizations who's coming together on July 15th in just 2 weeks at an event sponsored by the Bipartisan Policy Center to announce a call to strengthen and accelerate federal nutrition research. Because at the pace we're going, we'll know what we need to know in 50 years, and we don't have 50 years, right? We got to figure this out in the next 10 years. And so I invite everyone to join us. I invite Worth Media and Morgan Stanley to join that coalition. There's major businesses, food companies, health companies, investors, advocacy organizations that have said this is a priority and needs to be a priority. And then I think the second thing beyond advancing science, science is going to be where we need to go to figure out these questions, is to operationalize food as medicine, this concept that food is fundamental to health. And the best way to do that is to get it into the healthcare system, because all the dollars in our economy are in healthcare. And so rather than fighting around the edges for agricultural bills or food feeding programs or other things, we need to have healthcare start paying for healthy food. And there's ways to do that with produce prescription programs, medically tailored meals, things that are actually happening right now in real time in private insurance and some initial federal efforts. And so this isn't a future dream. This is something that could happen. We need to have healthcare pay for healthy food.
And you touched on this a bit. I mean, have you seen COVID? Do you think it has helped shift awareness more into the space around the need for better nutrition and the science investment that's required, or actually has it detracted?
I think it's definitely advanced it. I think a lot more people are talking about this and understanding it, especially when they see the numbers that, I described to you of the huge difference in risks for people that are very healthy or that have poor metabolic health. And that's definitely advanced the conversation, but it's still much too quiet. If you look at state governors, federal officials talking every day, they're talking about hand washing, mask wearing, personal protective equipment, vaccines, all things that are important, social distancing, all things that we should be doing. But, among those sort of 3 or 4 priorities, every single day, they should also be saying, and please try to eat a little healthier, try to exercise a little bit more. We've seen the population respond, and people are social distancing, wearing masks, washing their hands, changing their behavior. Not everybody, but a huge proportion of the global population has changed their behavior. And so this message hasn't yet reached kind of the highest levels of our policymakers. It's starting to, and so we're starting to see this enter the presidential campaign conversation in the United States and elsewhere. But given the scope of the problem and given the opportunity here for a healthier population, I think we're not yet where we need to be. And I think conversations like this one and platforms like Worth can be really important and influential in getting the word out.
I agree. Mariana, I saw you smiling and nodding away there.
Yes, I would love to add something that is like in Davos this year, there was a lot of discussions on how we are moving into a precision economy. In agriculture, it's about precision ag and technology and giving the plant what it needs, but it's also on food. So I totally agree with him. And I think that both things walk together, and it's a reality on like building tailored food. So we understand better our genetics, like we have more like our own microbiome inside our bodies. So there's a lot of sense on creating customized products for each person so they can be healthier, as the same way we are doing it with the plants.
It's interesting, Mariana, how you just said that, because I was going to jump in with Dariush and say, I think everybody's noticed that these small changes over the last 3 or 4 months with less travel and less pollution, and we're seeing the waters are clean, the skies are cleaner, and it's really made an impact on everybody. And I think a lot of times we feel that we're not enough to make a change. Like what we do isn't going to make a change, but now we're seeing collectively these small little changes are turning into something very big. And that would be the same with nutrition and food. And I do see people going back to basics. Do you guys see that too? I mean, people are enjoying sitting down as families again and having home cooked meals and really spending that time together. So I do think that there is an opportunity and a window here for all of us to make an impact and accelerate all of these ideas that everyone is sharing today. I just hope we actually do it. I think we can.
Amy, how do you think ad tech will change the way we eat? Sorry, I know you also had a comment there.
Oh, so off of what Kathy was saying, and then I want to answer that, is that I do see a shift, you know, with the local, at the local level, with the farms too, and the communities, because for example, where I live in the village, you know, where there's a lot of small farms, there's definitely with the small farms this year, a lot more demand for the CSAs. The farmers markets are open, and they are very popular, socially distanced, and I see families that are trying to learn how to farm and to grow their own food, and in interest in terms of eating healthier, a shift also in, I shouldn't just say a shift, but rather extending this eating of organic and healthy, especially with younger people and millennials. So I think it's going in a positive direction. It'll be interesting to see whether or not that demand for in the local farm areas and CSAs stay post-COVID as well.
It feels to me, Dariush, I know what you're saying about the federal moonshot and the state and the government sort of policy making, but I think a lot of the change we've seen has been at such a localized community level. And I think it's interesting that it's often the sort of community and the different sort of stakeholders coming together that are making these changes and making these shifts, as opposed to the government directing how we change our behavior.
Well, I think you need both. And so, you know, sales data are pretty clear that you have some segment of the population that's choosing more healthy foods and cooking more. And you have a very large segment of the population that's buying comfort foods and more packaged and processed foods than ever, and is eating much worse than ever before. And so, and that's not random. That's also dependent on education, income, and access. And so I think that relying on sort of, you know, the market alone to take care of problems will help, but will create divides and worsen inequities, and will also be slow. And so I think you absolutely need both. And the government isn't there to tell us what to do. The government is there to help facilitate and streamline and move things forward. You know, just two examples. One is opportunity zones. And so one of the current, you know, real successes has been the opportunity zones legislation, which has given sort of, you know, long-term free tax breaks for companies that invest in low-income neighborhoods in the country, sort of like an IRA for you know, investment. Why don't we have opportunity zones, new opportunity zones, specifically around ag, food, and nutrition that are focused on health, equity, and sustainability, right? That will spur and let those local success stories shine. You know, another example is, again, produce prescription programs. It's true we have farmers markets and you know, great food available, but many people can't afford that food. The people who particularly, you know, 20-30% of Americans were food insecure, now it's up to 40%. And so produce prescriptions let government insurance, instead of paying for only for expensive drugs and surgeries, it gives some dollars to those people in their communities to go and support their local farmers and spur innovation. So it's not either or, but the power of the government to spur change is enormous, and it should spur it by incentivizing and facilitating. And science, again, is one of the fundamental aspects of that. And there's no local effort's going to be able to invest in science the way the federal government can. And so I think, the National Institutes of Health, which is the global jewel of scientific research, one idea is that should have a National Institute of Nutrition within the National Institutes of Health. Why isn't there an institute focused on nutrition, investing $2-3 billion a year to help us address these questions? And so absolutely, it's not a draconian top-down approach, but it's a facilitator and catalyzer, I think, is what we need. And
there's a question from the audience. I think Amy or Mariana would love your view on this, about can the proliferation of ad tech make us healthier? What's your response to that, Amy?
Can the proliferation of ag tech make us healthier? Yes, I believe so. I mean, ag tech runs across the board from technology and innovation that tackles ways that the general aspect is that it makes farmers more efficient and the yields even higher. So for example, with soil, and I talked about the lack of farmable land, and also with soil health, there's all kinds of technologies that are now emerging to monitor soil health, pest management, looking at the genetics of the soil itself. And that's critical, I feel, because what goes into the soil goes into the food and goes into our bodies. So that's really important. So I am a big advocate of investing more in the science area as well. I mean, what would be the intersection of ag tech and ag bio? I really believe it starts a lot with the soil, actually, as well. So yeah.
Mariana?
Yes, I just like to add that, I totally agree. And I think it goes in two ways. One, farmers making better decisions in the field allow them to prepare better the whole crop and use less chemicals and so on. So as a result, we have a better food, a healthier food in the end. Or it allows new protocols such as regenerative farming, organic farming to grow and scale, which bring us more food. But there's also the other side, that is the environment. The well-done agriculture and data-driven agriculture help us to recover biodiversity, mitigate climate change, reduce pollution. So there is many things that makes our whole world better with less drastic climatic events. And I think it's healthier also on the breathing side, or being in an ecosystem that is equilibrated besides the food we are just eating.
And I've got a couple more questions. There's one, how do you think food and food systems will change post-pandemic, and are they already changing? Dariush, would you like to take that one first?
Well, I don't know how they'll change. I mean, it's very possible things will go back to, mostly normal, with the exception of, the online and digital connections and things like that. That would be a huge lost opportunity, right? Because COVID, again, is not going away anytime soon, and it's not the last pandemic. It's already the 5th pandemic, if SARS and Ebola and Zika and other viruses. So I think that I don't know what's going to happen, and I think that as was said earlier, together all of us can make the case to business leaders, to investors through ESG, to the government, state and local and federal governments and international governments, that we don't want to go back to the food system that we had. We want to push to something normal. If we don't, as a community of thought leaders, push others forward, it won't happen. And if we do, it will happen. And so I think that I'm not sure. I'm a little worried. And innovation is coming for sure, but whether that innovation will be geared towards health, equity, and sustainability or not is not clear. Going from Doritos to Cool Ranch Doritos is not innovation. Going from gummy bears to organic local gummy bears is not innovation. And that's I'm not making those things up. Those are real products, right? So I think that I'm a little worried, and I think we need to advocate. And again, ESG is a wonderful place for it. ESG is pretty mature for environment. It's pretty mature for government. The S, especially food and nutrition and health, is very underdeveloped. And so I think that there's an opportunity for thought leaders to get together and develop the strong metrics for the food and nutrition aspect, food system aspect of the S for all companies. But I'm a hopeful optimist, but I'm also a realist.
And Kathy, we've talked a lot about impact investing in ESG and how actually it should really be sort of rooted. It shouldn't be something that's on the side. It should be actually integral to how people are approaching investing going forward. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I think those are great points. We need to integrate impact investing in as well in the whole picture. I would say too, you know, we've been talking for a few weeks now, particularly with these, you know, the COVID, with the different people, as we're saying, who are being affected greater, are in socioeconomic areas that are underserved, and you know, their financial knowledge isn't as strong as it needs to be, and so is their nutritional knowledge is not as strong as it needs to be. And I think that it's really an opportunity to educate different parts of you know, the country, different cities, different areas where people are underserved, but you know, need to have that ability to make good decisions for themselves and their families, and now's the time to do it. So we're seeing a lot of companies, right? We've seen a lot of companies step up in the last few weeks in terms of whether it's COVID issues or the issues around literally police killing human beings based on the color of their skin. So I think we're seeing a lot of companies trying to step up and find a way for a message there. And those companies will, I believe, do better going forward because they're taking a stance and they're making impact. And they do have the funds to help support some of the things that we're talking about here today, including supporting the idea of health sciences, things like that, and helping individuals make better decisions, because the cost of treating these diseases that are caused by inflammation and poor choices maybe that are put on people is a lot greater than the cost of educating and providing the information, the nutritional information, the actual food that is healthier for everybody. So it is a shift. I'm an optimist, so I always like to look that we can do this. We just, if we can gather the right people and continue the momentum. But yeah, it's very possible that people will say it's not necessary, or they'll forget about it. COVID isn't going away. We are changing the way we live and we work and we integrate with each other. And also we need to change the way we eat.
And Dariush, you mentioned a number of other prior pandemics before this one. Have you ever seen anything? How does it compare? And have you seen anything of this scale prior to this?
Well, the other pandemics mostly missed the United States, of course, and so we have a pretty significant view here. But what's really unusual about COVID, again, is it's like a heat-seeking missile for poor metabolic health. It's really amazing. It's very unusual, and so it affects not only the respiratory cells, but vascular endothelial cells, the cells of the blood vessels, which is probably why it causes strokes and inflammation in the heart in children, and the kidney failure in big toe. So I think it's seeking out and really harming people who have chronic underlying systemic inflammation, who have chronic underlying dysfunction of their blood vessels, what's called endothelial dysfunction. And the most common reasons for chronic inflammation and chronic endothelial dysfunction are diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and heart disease. I mean, those are the big pandemics of our time. Half of American adults, have diabetes or prediabetes. More than half of American adults have some form of cardiovascular disease, and nearly 3 in 4 are overweight or obese. So a minority of American adults are actually healthy. I mean, think about that. Healthy is the new rare state of being. And so this virus in particular is very unusual because it's like pouring gas on a smoldering fire. It's this, again, fast pandemic on top of a slow pandemic. And I think that heightens the need, and the economic devastation it's caused heightens the need to really address metabolic health. If we can't do it now, with everything that we've learned, like, when are we ever going to do it?
I want to go to another question that's just come through. Mariana, what kind of technology can we expect to start seeing in the near future when it comes to agriculture and farming?
I think it's more about like the growth of the things we are already seeing, like the evolution of biotechs, like Amy and which mentioned. Like there's a lot of work on the soil and how we can work better the microbiomes and also use the soil as a carbon sequestration tool. So I think there's going to be a lot of technologies looking into that and how to measure better, how to metrify, how to ensure it's done. I think that's a path that is growing, and I think mass adoption of the existing ones like artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, and this kind of things. So I think like there was a lot of studies on how agtech would be into 2020, right? And the potential of the market and this kind of things. And now it was not there yet, but I think now with that we will have the push we need to grow. And I think we are also going to see more integrated and systemic agriculture and food chains technology orientation, where we don't actually care only about the farm, where most of the technologies are focused, but we care about the system and how we build resilience across that system. There will be more and more demand on food safety, so like more strict process for ensuring safety across the chain, and more traceability regarding how that food was produced. It's not only like we have today where it comes from, because we go to the supermarket and we have a QR code and we say, great, this comes a copy from Colombia or this from Brazil. And that's not what we need to do. We want to understand better what actually happened there. So I think we will increase a lot on the traceability of the food supply chain. And there is still very few, although we have like blockchain and so on, it's not very well built together. So I think we will see more solutions placing. And there is a huge trend on fintech. A lot of ag techs becoming ag fintechs and integrating financial technology and solutions into a one-stop shop.
And Amy, what challenges and opportunities do you think this next normal will present for the industry?
So I think there's a lot of opportunities actually, during COVID and post-COVID. And I want to go back to the idea of food as wellness and just the foundation of wellness as well, is that there's an opportunity in education, basically in further in connecting the farmer or the grower further with consumers, and also getting to understand the technology that's also used there. So this could be everything from a small farmer, who has like 20 acres, who potentially offers some educational tours and also shares his knowledge or her knowledge about growing and about everything from the process to seeding to planting to harvesting to even children K to 12. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity there at the K to 12 level and also the college and post-college level to open up some of the farms, whether that be dairy farms or vegetable farms. And also in terms of cultivating the next next generation of innovators and also growers as well. There is a huge challenge in farming now where the question is who will be farming the land next. Farming is very hard work, very labor intensive, it's very costly, so there's a lot of young people who are not taking over the reins of their father or their grandfather's farms. So it's really finding ways, maybe creating programs and mentorships where young people can learn more about agriculture and ag tech and see that it's not just tractors and overalls.
We need to draw the conversation to a close, but I do want to sort of hear from you all on sort of what are some of the bright spots you see on the horizon. And sort of what excites you next about this period in the industry. Mariana?
She's on mute.
I think it's like people getting together for greater causes. I think the pandemic unlocked a lot of things inside us that we feel responsible and we want to get engaged by major cases, like the diversity and climate resilience and food resilience and safety. So I'm happy because I see more people getting interested, and I think more like this understanding that we're all together, like we can be in different nations, but if we don't do our part, then the whole world gets affected. So I'm excited about this future collaboration of humanity towards a better world.
Thank you. Kathy?
I agree, and I'll get a little more granular. I always like to make an impact on my clients and on, you know, the world around me. So to be able to guide clients through the ESG investing process and maybe even see some of these VC and, you know, investor opportunities come to fruition, where there's an opportunity for investors to directly invest through a fund or a portfolio into this concept of nutrition, agriculture, technology, food, the whole 9 yards. I think that would be really interesting and meaningful and important.
And Dariush, you've shared some incredible insights on the state of nutrition and food systems, but also given some really interesting ways and solutions to some of that. What are some bright spots that you see, or some signs of hope that we can perhaps move in a better direction?
I'll give three, really quick, great spots of hope. One is millennials. Millennials are shopping, and putting their money where their heart is, which is health, trust, transparency, sustainability. And so they're rapidly upending the current food system, and everybody's taking notice, and innovation is happening everywhere. And so I think as long as it's science driven, we're not making, Frankenstein products that aren't actually better for people, I think that's a huge plus. I think number two, that government, businesses, payers, healthcare payers, everybody's actually starting to pay attention to food as medicine. And so it's not a theoretical idea anymore. There are healthcare systems that are paying for food and helping their low-income patients get healthier food. The government is starting to consider bills. The federal government in the US is starting to consider bills. And so I think that should definitely be moved forward with a coalition of businesses and advocacy groups. And then lastly, I think the science is really exciting, and we're just starting to understand how to use big data, microbiome, personalization. And again, that's why we really need a new national push in the United States and elsewhere to really invest in this, because we can unlock so many unknowns and push the whole field forward, help businesses, help ag tech, help low-income communities, and lower healthcare spending at the same time. And so I think that's the opportunities for science are also really exciting.
Thank you. And Amy?
I would say that with this pandemic and maybe post-COVID as well, there's a lot of more attention placed on food and agriculture, and everything from the the farm workers are essential workers as well. And there's been greater interest in terms of just, food and health. So I would hope that would continue, and food and agriculture and these discussions would continue to be at the forefront. And also with ag tech, I see lots of opportunities, like I say, in educating everybody from investors to growers to the consumer. And what is ag tech? I still get this asked a lot, like what's ag tech? So there's a bit of a mystery, I think there. It's a little bit of an enigma, but I think if we open up some farms and have some more demonstrations to consumers, they'll better understand how it goes from a little seed to to harvest into their plates or the supermarket. Yeah, so I'm an optimist as well.
Thank you. Amy, Mariana, Dariush, and Kathy, thank you so much for such an insightful discussion into the future of agriculture, nutrition, food, and ag tech. Thank you also to Kathy Entwistle at Morgan Stanley for being our partner for this series. That conversation was rich in insights and ideas, and we'll be sharing a write-up with you on the discussion. Most importantly, thanks to all of you that joined us today and for your great questions. We hope you enjoyed it. Please do share feedback with us. We'd love to hear your comments. You can email us at community@worth.com. Next week at Worth Live, for the next normal series, we'll be talking about the future of healthcare and tech with Northswede General Partner at Global Ventures, which is on next Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Please register online at worth.com/events for all of this and our future events, as well as sign up to our weekly newsletter. And before you close, we'll be sharing a quick poll, if you wouldn't mind taking this to just share with us where you heard about this event. So it will help us with planning for future. In the meantime, be kind, be safe, be healthy, enjoy the rest of your day. And for those in the US, have a great July 4th holiday.